California and a red clay of Georgia.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to A Talk in the Attic. I'm your host, Kirk Ross. I have today with me, on this very spooky Friday the 13th, Colin Singh Dhillon. He's the Chief Technical Officer at the Automotive Parts Manufacturing Association in Canada. He's so much more than that. This guy is a Sikh. He's intelligent. He's got a big picture mentality. I'm so grateful that I was introduced to him 5-6 years ago back in the auto industry. He was a head of design at a very well-known automotive supplier called ABC Group. He has since moved on into the more lobbying kind of big picture Canadian policy formation, which I think is great. If you're still on the fence, listen to what he talks about with me. By the end of this thing, you're going to want to vote for this guy for the next prime minister. He's the man. Colin, thank you so much. Let's start the show.
Hey Jude, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better. Remember to let her into your heart. Then you can start to make.
All right, well, here I am today. We're doing kind of a live intro, a live lead-in, uncommon here. Normally we're doing that in post-production, but I'm here with Colin Dhillon. What's up, Colin?
Hey, great to see you again, Kirk, and thanks for having me on your show, to be honest.
Well, you're coming from the Northern Lights. You look very ethereal. It's beautiful. You are a designer. Okay, we'll get into exactly the rest of what you are, too. But I always enjoy talking with you in my previous career in the automotive industry at auto shows or design shows. I loved your perspective. I don't know a ton about your background, so I'll be learning right along with all of you listeners. Colin, why don't you give a little bit of an elevator speech as to kind of what you consider yourself today from a professional capacity, and then from there we'll kind of maybe weave back through your upbringing and whatever got you here.
Great. Well, hey, I consider myself as a designer gone wrong. You know, I started my academic career, my initial jobs were in the realm of design, a product designer, and industrial designer. I worked in the consumer goods products. I worked designing funeral caskets. I worked designing electroencephalograms and ECGs and EEGs and ultrasound, medical devices. And then about 20 or so years ago, my wife cut out a job opening in the local newspaper where a local automotive company was looking for a packaging designer. And she's like, hey, why don't you apply? And I'm like, I'm not a packaging designer. That's below me. And 19 years later, I left that great organization and company. And I'm currently today, as I said, a designer gone wrong. I'm currently the Chief Technical Officer helping to launch connected and autonomous vehicle technology, focusing on smart cities and cybersecurity. So
Wow. I mean, that's
off on a tangent.
I mean, designer gone wrong, perhaps designer gone well, though. I mean, you're CTO for the Automotive Parts Manufacturer Association of Canada.
That's correct, yeah. The APMA has been around for over 68 years. It was founded originally, I believe, as the Automotive and Aerospace Parts Manufacturers kind of association, and then they separated a few years later. We have been for many years the voice of the auto parts manufacturers in Canada. We are coast to coast. We are national throughout Canada. We help to lobby on behalf of the auto parts, suppliers. And for I think for most of those 6 or so decades, Kirk, it would have been more around regulatory and policy, influence and support. But with the change in the sector both of you and I have kind of in and come from, to this digitization of our sector, it suddenly asked harder questions of the APMA to ask to support in areas like connected vehicle technology, autonomous vehicle technology. Like if you're a brand new member to the APMA and then you're saying to the team at the APMA, hey, listen, I can't seem to get in front of the global OEMs with my secret sauce or my gizmo. How can you support us? Those kind of conversations led us to, lead the charge when it came to connected and autonomous vehicle demonstrations.
Right.
And because of that, we suddenly found ourselves into the realm of smart cities and vehicle to everything kind of connectivity. And when I joined, one of the first things that I learned was the lack of cybersecurity, and how we were embracing cyber and privacy and the way we should be. And I've now become a passionate voice supporting that as well.
Yeah, I mean, so on its surface, it kind of sounds similar to what in the U.S. we have the OESA, sort of, in that you're kind of helping in that lobbying capacity. But does the U.S. have a similar body that's focusing so heavily on the integration of all this, or is it? I feel like because the automotive industry being centered in Detroit, I don't get at all like the real vibe of what the globe is doing in terms of autonomous driving, because we're kind of resistant to it here for obvious reasons. So can you explain that kind of comparison between, the Canadian status of this project versus the U.S.?
Well, it's similar in the sense that the OESA and the APMA are long-standing partners, again, including countries from the G7, Brazil, Japan, Europe, the UK, and what have you. Some of the initiatives, I would have to say, not blowing our own trumpet, that we've kind of undertaken over the last 2 or 3 or 4 years, are world leading when it comes to connected and autonomous vehicle initiatives. I had a great conversation yesterday with the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, and they were asking us for information when it comes to curriculum development. We're saying, look, there's a shortage of specialists in the cyber field. So the way to fix that is to speak to academia, colleges and universities, and start to develop curriculum. Right. And, the EU felt that was great, and could we share that? So, we definitely know some of our initiatives are global leading, and the largest one being the latest, which is Project Arrow. Back in January at CES in Vegas, Kirk, we announced and launched Project Arrow. That is to build Canada's first zero-emission concept vehicle. Now, again, in the context of a trade association, people are like, "Are you guys bonkers? Like, what is a trade association doing, wanting to build?" Our pushback, and I was fortunate enough, whilst the world was still fairly normal in February, I represented the APMA for G7 meetings that were held in India.
Nice.
And I introduced the G7 colleagues to Project Arrow, and everybody was very supportive and also, astonished and wanted to understand how they could maybe do something similar in their own jurisdictions. But, for us, what better way to showcase Canadian capabilities in electric vehicle development, in autonomous vehicle development, than to build a platform, an actual platform to do it on? So, we've undertaken it. We've finished the design phase, where we've got a great looking vehicle.
Wow.
And by the end of 2022, we will actually have a fully working prototype / concept vehicle.
And that'll comprise components from the APMA member suppliers primarily,
Absolutely.
or all?
Absolutely. Yeah. We're trying to, because it's a Canadian initiative, we're trying to keep it as Canadian as possible. But we're not saying that if you're an American company, let's say, for example, but you have operations in Canada, you can actually be a part of it as well. And then we, this past month, had some really good announcements coming out of Ford's Oakville, Ontario facility, where they're going to be building some EVs.
Nice.
And FCA made the same kind of announcements coming out of Windsor, Ontario. So suddenly Canada has an EV, requirement. We now have to build out a strong EV supply chain.
Fantastic. Yeah. So you're based in Toronto?
Yeah, the offices are in Toronto. I live north of Toronto, in a more rural setting, as you can see with the Northern Lights in the back.
Yeah, it's very clear out there.
And it stays like this 24/7. But originally, as you asked me at the beginning, as you can probably tell from the fake accent, I'm not from Canada originally. I'm actually born and brought up, or born and bred, as we said back home in the United Kingdom, in England. I grew up. Parents came from India in the 60s. I arrived in the 70s, did all of my schooling there, and then I came to North America, had a look around Canada and the US and decided to settle in Toronto.
So when you went to design school back in the Birmingham area, is that right?
Well, it should have been, but I went to art school in Birmingham, and then I did my degree at Sheffield, which was kind of north of Birmingham.
And so coming up in that area, I know Detroit. I'm a Detroit guy, kind of, right? So like when you go into design, product design in Michigan, and even other places in the U.S., you're kind of there's an implication almost that you're heading towards the auto field at some point, auto industry. Can the same be said for the UK?
No, and for myself, most definitely not. I never thought I'd ever end up in the auto sector. I had no desire. For me, it was going to be consumer goods and products, and then medical. And when I actually joined a medical company, we were taking ECGs and EEG machines, which used to be back in the 90s, two CPU towers sitting on a trolley with a keyboard and a screen, and we were able to condense that all into, and we were cutting aluminum billets and making these kind of laptops out of aluminum a decade before Apple decided to do it. The company I worked for was a company known as XL Tech. And so I was integral into helping that transition, coming up with new products and new ideas. And the medical sector in the 90s and 80s and for the design world was seen as the epitome and the highest point to be working in. And after about 11 months, I said to myself, man, if this is it, I'm in my early mid 20s. I report directly to the CEO. If this is it, I was working on some of the latest software, doing CAD work, and
you're already bored of it.
Yeah, if this is it, I'm done. And I quit. I quit after 11 months. I quit on good terms. I said, look, I'm going back to the UK. I'm going to get into teaching. I'm going to do my teaching certifications. But I feel so bad. I'll hire on my another individual for the company on my behalf. And right. I did that. I remember after finishing my 1 year stint in the UK in like 1997, when I came back, the owner actually reached out and he wanted me to come back. He goes, look, come back. There's a position here for you. And I said, thanks, but I'm not going to I'm going to look elsewhere. Yeah. And I was actually looking, and I was fortunate enough when I started at the tier one part suppliers, as a packaging designer, I was also approached by a local college to teach some of their design courses. And I was able to work that into my original contract. And, I ended up spending over 12 years of teaching part-time design to design students as well as working. So.
Well, I want to hear a little bit about that. What is it about education and specifically about teaching that kind of gets you going?
So let me give you some background to it, genetic background. My grandfather was a headmaster back in India. My father was a teacher. So I think there was something in the DNA that was bubbling up. I'm a storyteller. I'm a person who reads and learns and then wants to share. And I think I put all that together, and I began to... I also ask hard questions. One of the challenges I had at university was, I was part of a small group of the 40 students that challenged the profs as well quite often. So if something had, if it didn't pass the sniff test, then we were probably going to be the ones that asked the questions, and it didn't go over too well sometimes. Yeah. So I had said to myself that if I'm ever going to be in that position, I want to make sure that I try and give it as real as I possibly can. And that's exactly what happened. I was fortunate enough to, some would say unfortunate, because I was literally told, here is the subject, here is the current curriculum and content, but you now rewrite it as you see fit. Oh, and so not only as I began teaching and lecturing, I also had to develop the curriculum, which kind of developed over years as well. And because of all of the work I did, you and I used to bump into each other at the Eyes on Design competition, right, at the North American International Auto Show in Detroit. I became very good friends with Ralph Gills from head of FCA because of my teaching background. I'll share a short story. We're all sitting around on our individual tables after we came back from judging the cars. Yeah. And we're all talking design philosophy and design theory. And I said, well, you know what? I just came across something this past semester. And I think I've kind of, I believe design is about the way you see things. And, Ralph was sitting directly in front of me, and there's a few others. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, what I started to do, because my last few years, Kirk, we're at a college called Georgian College in Barrie, Ontario area. And I was actually teaching technical, engineer, technician types of students to think like design and to use design innovation.
Yeah, that would be good, if we could learn how to get the engineers to think more like designers and vice versa, it would be a better world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but the challenge used to be, I used to be teaching them to begin to draw and sketch and to put their ideas on paper. And I used to get pushed back as soon as the first class, oh, I can't draw, blah, blah, blah. And it used to be a bit of an uphill battle, but let's go for it. So what I decided to do this one particular year was I'd buy a pack of 24 bottles of water, and I'd go around the class and give everyone one, or two share one. And I literally said, right, take off the tops, have a swig of it so you don't spill it all over your work, and just place it down. And I want you to just simply sketch what you see. And I said, let me just underline. And I wrote, see on the board, and I'm like, sketch what you see.
Right.
And so they started about 25 minutes into it. I walked around, and then I sat back down, and then 10 minutes later I walked around again, and then I critiqued everyone as I walked around. And to be honest, you have a bottle in front of you. You look at the bottle, and then there are threads on the top of the bottle. And there are actually 3 threads that you can see, but you may have sketched 4, or you may have sketched 5.
Right.
So I would stop and go, how many threads are on the bottle? Oh, there's 3. I'm like, okay, how many are on your sketch? Oh, I've got 5. Why? I don't know. I'm like, okay. And what's that line running down the center? Oh, I don't know. It's like I don't know. It's fault line. I mean, it's a parting line. That's where I began to explain to them how this thing gets manufactured, looking for details. I didn't care for proportions. I didn't care if your bottle was like, tall enough to be a 2-liter bottle or small enough to be like a compact, 250 milliliter bottle. Right. For me, it was about beginning to learn to see what you really see as opposed to what you think you see. Right. And the 14-week semester course, Kurt, was mind-blowingly amazing when it comes to the level of work and how they began to understand design and problems, and sometimes not assuming. And I'm sharing this with all these individuals. Ralph is this demigod who's the head of FCA Studios, the father of the 300 and the, all those beautiful vehicles.
And such a cool guy too, like a down to earth,
and
normal
such
guy.
Oh my goodness me, like, just a demigod. Like there's nowhere. And, I remember sitting in the, they were the senior judges, we were the docents. And I remember sitting there looking up at the stage going, man, I'd love to have lunch with this guy, but I'm not going to ask him because it's going to be like as if I'm sniffing around him, right? And so I didn't ask him that year. And then this following year, we're having this conversation, and he, he raised his eyebrows and said, that's really interesting. And we all went off, and he sat back on the stage and introduced blah, blah, blah. And, I sat down on the audience. I wasn't a judge those first 2 years. And as we're walking back at the end of the event, Kirk, somebody taps me on the shoulder, and I turn around, and it's Ralph, and he's like, hey, man. He goes, listen, I'd love to stay in touch. I'm like, yeah, so would I. Like, I'm trying to hold back my excitement. Like,
really,
yeah,
please?
Like, yeah. And he's like, okay, here's my card. I'm like, oh, I already have your card. And he's like, no. He flipped his card over, and he goes, here's my cell number. It's really the only way you can get a hold of me. I'm like, oh, great. I'm like, wow. And ever since, we've done lunch together. He was part of the judging panel for Project Arrow. Like, we've just connected because he's such an all-round good guy. And there's a spiritual connection, to be honest, between Ralph and myself. And so, but it was because of this idea and the approach to teaching. I taught ergonomics. And I made all the students develop a piece of apparatus to understand the ideal proportions of a cafe chair. Mm-hmm. I said, dare you make this chair look pretty and cool. It better bloody look like a piece of apparatus that you find in like a science kind of project or in a testing lab. You better not, if this thing looks sleek, I'm going to take marks off from you guys. And so I had kids coming up with ping pong balls with like dowels sticking to see the contours of the back. And then I made him go through this whole exercise, do these trials and tests. And of the 6 groups, Kirk, 5 of them hit all the criteria from the 5th percentile female to 95th percentile male. It was bang on. Like they literally, their own homework was spot on to what, global leaders in human factors and
what you strive for.
About. Yeah. Absolutely. One group was off on a tangent, but hey, there's always one, right? And so, but it was all of this, I would infuse my passion. I'm a passionate kind of guy. I would infuse my passion, hopefully, into the students. And, I think I had a bit of credibility because I worked, a full-time day job as well, running a design studio for one of Canada's largest tier 1. So,
right.
But yeah, I really did enjoy it. And I missed it after life got too busy, too many projects inside, outside of work. And I stepped aside. It's the one thing I do miss, which is teaching.
But I'm sure you integrate that into your day-to-day operations as a CTO, if you can, and also at your previous company. Are we allowed to talk about your previous company? Or
yeah,
no?
Absolutely.
Yeah, ABC Group, right? I mean, it's a huge company.
Yeah, ABC Group, and a great company, still very closely connected to them. They're obviously members of the APMA. Absolutely. I tended to hire younger folk to work in my department so I could provide that guidance. You try and identify talent, and then you just say, right, we're just going to create the criteria for this individual to succeed now.
Right.
And at no point was there ever a feeling of threat. I always try to look beyond threat, personal threat. Like I never felt threatened by colleagues. I was like, hey, look, this is who I am and this is what I do, and I know what I do well, and let's just try and replicate or generate more of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's that's obviously the way to be. That's the way to be. It's but
it's not easy. It wasn't always that way. Initially there was, you're insecure, because things happen, and sometimes just because you are insecure. But then as you begin to grow as an individual, that stuff starts to kind of, should start to kind of, exude outwards.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredible. So we're not going to abandon the design conversation because that's where I want to spend the majority of the conversation, specifically your philosophy and how you see it, where you see it, you've seen it come from, and also where you see it heading. But before we get there, not only do you have Northern Lights in the background, but you also have a special type of headwear. What is this headwear?
Oh, well, thanks for asking. Yes. So my heritage, my ancestors come from the northeast corner of India, known as the Punjab. There was a faith called Sikhism that was founded just over 500 years ago. And the founder was born in 1469. The last kind of guru teacher passed in 1708. Like it's a very, very new philosophy, if you want to call it that way.
Right.
We are a race of people who believe in the one energy source. You can call it God, you can call it wherever you want. We are the 5th largest faith in the world. Sikhism is the 5th largest faith in the world, and predominantly the ones that wear turbans. And
right.
the sad fact is, to be honest, Kurt, is since 9/11, there are others that wear headgear, and suddenly, Sikhs have been mistaken for, those others, and there have been some challenges. But, I'm always big on don't judge the book by the cover. Don't even look at, hey, Colin's got a turban, he must be a good Sikh guy, right? Get to know me and then you'll figure out if I am. But it's the faith has a beautiful philosophy. When we pray, the last thing we say is, in Punjabi, it's Nanak Naam Chardi Kala Tere Pane Sarbat Da Pala, which translated into English is, may God bless the whole of humanity.
Nice. I love it.
Done. Like it's such an open-ended philosophy. It doesn't describe a people. It doesn't say, oh, you must have to be a Sikh. We've kind of created that as people in the last few hundred years. Right. It doesn't. The philosophy doesn't. It's very open-ended. It understands commerce. It understands the rights of individuals. Our first guru in the 15th century, think about this, Kurt, talked about equal rights for women. and the suffragette and the movement for women to be able to vote happened in the 1900s.
Right. It took 500 years.
Yeah. Like the first guru said, well, hold on, how can you condemn her who gives birth to kings and prophets? Like let's pump the brakes here a little bit. So it's a great philosophy. I'm proud to represent it. Hence why I wear the turban. You'll meet many Sikhs who don't necessarily wear the turban. That's their own prerogative. It's never been easy. It's not easy. If you were to, I'm just finishing off writing an autobiographical, book on myself. And if you read the first several chapters, you'll be like, how did you survive? How are you sitting where you are because of the racism I faced growing up, both myself and my brother, to be the only two boys in a school in England in the 70s and 80s that wore a turban when it was actually fashionable to be a skinhead. It wasn't easy. But my parents used to tell us that, it will only make you stronger. It will only, you'll reap the benefits later on, kids. And me and my brother used to kind of whisper to ourselves, that's if we survive to reap the benefits.
Right. I mean, that's crazy that I feel like that just from here, the UK kind of has more integration of more cultures, where I feel like it's a little bit less tribal there. But your experience was that it was very racist, right?
No, England's got a lot of cultures, Kurt. It's very tribal, and I'll explain it on through football or soccer as it's known as well. The reason that you had so much hooliganism and fights between rival teams was because it is so tribal in England. England is very tribal. If you're from the south, you look upon everyone else as being somewhat less than. If you're from the north, you think you're stronger and everyone else is therefore like there is so much tribalism. And Brexit, let's not forget, Brexit wasn't about economics. It was about stopping the Polish and the Romanian people to coming from the UK. So they just didn't want any more Polish folks coming over to the UK, period. That it was an immigration vote, not a vote on saving its economy from the European Union.
Brexit was rising at the same time as Trumpism and all this other. It kind of was spreading globally. This return to nationalist views, almost, right? And I can't be further opposed to that personally, but.
Same here. It was a shame to obviously see what happened south of the border just over 4 years ago, because it then led to bigots like the current Prime Minister of England coming into power,
right,
and others. But I think we've been fortunate that the damage isn't as severe. Listen, I tweeted last week saying it's probably going to take America decades to get over the dog whistling racism that this man allowed to occur. Because listen, for any people to say, or any individual to say they're not racist, look, we've all got our racism and prejudices. Right. It's just human nature. But to what extent do you carry those as tools in your toolkit? Do you know what I mean? You can have a thought, or you can have listen, I don't know this particular community, so therefore I'm afraid of them, or I think they're like this.
Yeah. But
if you meet them, then it should quench and quell any thoughts you may have had that were negative.
Right.
And then suddenly you're on a different, but those individuals that somehow continue, and listen, I'm a big history buff, and I'm aware of American history as well. And America has a huge challenge on their hands. I don't think they've gotten over the Civil War from 1861 to 1865. I really think
definitely
there is some divisional thoughts and philosophies on who is an American and who isn't American. And the poor African Americans have gone through this for not even decades, for centuries now.
Right. Yeah,
there's a lot of things that have to be corrected, and it's not, and it can't just be lip service corrections. It has to be right. We have to go deeper than this, and it can't be. And again, lip service can sometimes be described for having gender equality or ethnicity equality. Oh, we must have in a group of 10, there should be at least one person of color. I don't want that. People need to adjust policies and regulations to make sure the best people go to the top. But if you're of color and you are the best person, you better not be stopped. And the one sector that I feel this is flourishing is the tech sector. If you look at the tech sector and you look at gender equality, you look at kind of, race equality, there is a lot more of that happening in the tech sector, which is this new sector, than in some of the more traditional sectors.
Is it just a function of a younger leadership? Probably. I mean, in part,
I think
right?
so. I think so. I think so. And there isn't this tradition, don't get me wrong. I was a major publication reached out to me when Black Lives Matter was happening, in a big way a few months ago in the US. And they reached out and said, hey, we know you've spent like 20 plus years in the auto sector. Can you share your story? I'm like, absolutely. And they were totally expecting to hear some horror stories. I said, sorry. I've never come home and sat down on the dinner table and said to my wife, man, you know what? I don't think I got that promotion because of my color of my skin, because of the thing I'm wearing on my head.
Right.
Not once. I've never felt it. I used to be in Warren, Michigan, in Ann Arbor. I used to be all over, whether it's at Ford or GM or Chrysler or Toyota, wherever it may be.
Right.
I never really felt it, never did. And so I'm like, hey, but I have eyes in the back of my head because as a child and growing up in England and going through school and academic periods at university, I always felt it. I always, those comments or those looks, I never really felt them in the auto sector, but it's changing, right? It needs to change. Mary Barra, head of GM,
right.
nothing to talk about. No eyes need to be blinked. It's normal. Why isn't she the, that needs to be the mindset. Maybe the mindset you have, Kirk, and the mindset I have, which is, why are we having this conversation of a Black person or an Indian person or,
just
like
a person, right?
Kamala Harris. Now, Kamala Harris, she's half Indian and half Jamaican,
It's so cool. Yeah, she's
cool.
Cool,
a female. Like but it shouldn't be, it's taken, the US that many years to think about a woman in that position.
And there's a lot of resistance to it still.
Yeah. And that's where things need to be, and one of the things I think is, I think we need to look at education again. I think there was a model built around education in the West after the Industrial Revolution. I talk about the Industrial Revolution because the first commercial steam engine that was built in the world was by James Watt and Matthew Boulton in a town called Tipton in the UK, which is the town I was born in.
Oh, wow.
And so that is my only claim to fame. It is what started the Industrial Revolution.
That's why I had you on here actually today to talk about
exactly why. Yeah, steam engines.
Real citizen.
So this led to a changing of society and the cottage industry dying off, and then people having to move closer, and the working and the work hours and all these new they were all new. There were a lot of new things happening, policies on who could work, how long you could work, and all these things started to change things. Education, they say, also changed, where a government may not necessarily want all of its students to graduate and go to university. A government may want to have a portion of their students to really fail, who then have to rely upon the government. And a portion of that group should also be the working group, that work, blue collar and all that. And do you know what I mean? Like there are models in place to keep certain groups into certain areas.
And that has to ring true to you with Indian heritage, because that's pretty, the caste system is still kind of alive and well in India to some extent, right?
Very much so. And the one thing, one of the founding philosophies of Sikhism was it crushed the caste system. It literally said, how can you judge a person because of the house they're born in? Judge a person on their deeds, on their character. Don't judge them on their home. But it is still very strong and in India, and it needs to be tackled, because you shouldn't be judging. You need to be judged on what you've said and what you do, as opposed to the home you're born into. So I think education needs to be looked at as well, Kurt, for the next 100 years. We don't seem to teach mortgages. We don't seem to teach home financing at school, when, let's face it, most people haven't got a good angle on home financing and mortgages and loans, right, and debts. People are drowning in debt, because we somehow, it's not like the light bulb hasn't gone off.
Sometimes we're all well aware of it, right?
Yeah, but why isn't this being taught to us at a young age?
I think you hit it on the head. I think for the system to work as it's currently set up, it is required for most of us to be in debt.
Yeah. There's definitely some issues, as good as things are in any one of our two nations. But we're hoping that more progressive thoughts and mindsets kind of make their way to the top. And part of what I've tried to do, and why I started off by saying I'm a designer gone wrong, is because what I do today is I simply just use design thinking in any situation, as a designer, whether I'm in autonomous vehicles, as a designer in cybersecurity, it's simply applying design thinking to solve problems.
That was what a wonderful segue. You're doing my job for me. My goodness. Well, first, before we close the discussion on cultural sensitivity and things like that, my personal belief on it is the same as yours. And my personal belief also was that this might be some people watching or listening's first exposure to a Sikh. And therefore, I think that's why it is so important you carry yourself so well. You don't need that burden. You don't need that pressure. But that is there. And I know for a fact that people whose first exposure will be to you through Sikhism, then they're going to have a good feeling about it, So thank you for representing yourself in that group so well.
And thanks for asking the question. To be honest, it's like I've been doing it for many years. I have to every day I leave the home with my turban on. I know I'm representing a people. It's not easy. Sometimes it's just, don't get me wrong, when it's kind of -5 and I'm going for a walk down the street, I've got my head kind of in the back and I've got a toucan and there's no turban, but right. Jokes aside, it is, but it's the philosophy as well. I'm not a preacher, but I definitely share the philosophy of this oneness, this kind of, what is this entity? Sikhism doesn't, for example, believe in heaven and hell. They have the words that describe a heavenly place and a hellish place. Mm-hmm. But the gurus said, if your life is great, if your life is pretty amazing, then tell me a better heaven you're going to go to. And they said, if your life's pretty bad, especially up here mentally, tell me hellfire's down south that could get any worse. They say, look, it's all here. Don't be investing in, I'm going to treat everyone like shit here, but I'm going to sit with my rosary and aim for a place upstairs in the, through the pearly gates. It really kind of makes sense, because we know we've all got those characters, both in your world, in my world. Right. Life is meant to be good here. Life, you're meant to get up happy every day, Kirk, and you're meant to go to bed happy every day. This is, we're on a spinning rock, as my president at the APMA says, Flavia Volpe. We're on a spinning rock. It's a miracle we're all here. Right. Let's enjoy it.
Amen. So with that,
Here comes the sun.
We'll be back right after this short break.
Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right.
Let's enjoy it.
Amen. So with that, I can already sense, just based on some of your context clues and what I know of you from before, that this oneness that you speak of maybe was bred through that upbringing, the Sikh upbringing, but that definitely infiltrates and is a big part of your design philosophy as well, this idea of oneness. Tell me what your design philosophy is. And I'm doing this to make it difficult for you. Sure. I want to see you think on your toes, because you're just handling this interview so freaking well. So you have a minute to describe what your vision of design is, and let's keep it very 30,000 feet right now. Yeah. I don't want to specify exactly what type of design. We'll kind of go in from there. Ready? Go.
Yeah. So design is multifaceted, and it really is first of all, it's the mental way, and then it becomes the physical way of getting from a position to a solving position. Design should always be solving something, whether it's the encasement of a phone, or whether it's the fixture, around the base of a Christmas tree. Like, do you know what I mean? It's, you're solving something. Design, and it's multifaceted, because it can apply, I always used to say, to a pen, or all the way to a plane. Like, what can I do? I can work on anything and everything, because in between those 2 points is the problem, and you simply have to solve it.
And that's a very industrial design mindset. A lot of folks that I've run into, even in the auto industry, even in the industrial industry world, they tend to confuse the idea of unfettered artistic expression Right. And then on the other side, you have this kind of, okay, well, what needs to get done? What's the utility of this product? And of course, I think you need to have that scale of people, obviously. How do you kind of reconcile that? And where did you find yourself? It sounds to me like you found yourself more on the utility side, but
Well, so I was always kind of more practical, not practical, aesthetically, everything has to be pleasing. Everything about me, my car, my environment, like there is an aesthetic to it, which you will go, I think he's probably a designer, right? I purposely wore this kind of Jacquard Google jean jacket because it's part of the package that I wanted to present.
it's cool.
Today.
You look pretty cool.
But to get, I mean, it's so I think the artistic kind of aspect of design should be there because, you know, I can practically, let's go back to a cell phone. I can practically encase the printed circuit board, the battery, and all the information in a honking piece of whatever glass or metal, and it's functional.
Right.
But aesthetically, I now have to sculpt this to make sure it's not only as aesthetically pleasing to myself, but because it's a consumer good, I want to make sure there are sales. And so, you know, and it goes all the way down. One of the things I love about Apple was how much attention they paid to their packaging. Right. The fact that you have that kind of like vacuum seal as you lifted the box off to get your watch out or your phone out, like it just felt like there was an unveiling happening. Yeah. And so, you know, so the industrialist kind of, you know, a vision of solving problems can be aesthetically pleasing. It doesn't have to be kind of just practical. You know, that's the one thing I've always juggled with, and I'm hopefully done well. Like I'll give you an example. The Dodge Ram 1500 pickup truck,
the current
which has
model.
Yeah, the current, well, from the first ones in 2008-9 that had the storage in the sides, right?
Yeah.
Those are my baby. So that's that's one of my babies.
That's a beautiful product that Ram owns the IP on.
That's right.
So they own it through ABC.
So we developed in pickup bed storage. The access wasn't necessarily from the top, it was more from the sides. Right. We pitched it to GM first in 2004-05, and GM said, no interest. We then went to Ford, and Ford said, actually, we're looking at doing a full-size one that goes fore aft in the pickup bed. So we began working on a project with them, and then we went to Daimler Chrysler back then. And we pitched it to them, and they said, you know what, we're thinking about something similar. And we started to work collaboratively together. But that was my baby to pitch. It was my baby to actually, I put the program management together. I quoted the business back at ABC Group, and we helped to launch it. There was challenges. The volumes were a fraction of what they thought they were going to be. You know, they were predicting 100,000. I think it was like 24,000 the first year.
Yeah, they just priced it wrong, or what?
Yeah, well, it just there wasn't much marketing around it for whatever reason. But it's such a great practical project. Do you know what I mean? Like it makes sense. It solves a problem, but aesthetically, man, it looks as good as it ever did. The vehicle we haven't detracted. There you go. And so that's always been part of my philosophy is that I'm not one of those. Look, I went to art school in Bourneville in Birmingham in the UK, and I was getting pulled left, right, and center. The fine art teachers wanted me to go into fine art. The fashion teachers wanted me to go in fashion, and the product design teachers wanted me to go in product. But at no point was I one of those artsy types who just philosophically talks about. I've never been that type.
Right.
For me, it's all great up there, but can it sell? Can it be priced at a good price? But do you know what I mean? Like all of those.
That's the important stuff. That's the real practical stuff.
You can dream up things. You can dream up and make things look aesthetically amazing. But when you start to break it down and can you manufacture it? And because of my 20 years working in injection molding, blow molding, thermoforming, compression molding, I understand some of the metal processes. Those have really helped to kind of give me a really strong foundation. So when I begin to design or think about design, I'm already seeing this thing exploded and how it kind of comes together.
In a mechanical sense, right?
In a mechanical sense.
In a feasibility sense, obviously, too.
Exactly.
And so is there nothing more exciting to someone like you than the fact that we're miniaturizing all of our electronics and all of that? That has to be so exciting.
It's the fact that for me, the most exciting aspect at the moment is beyond the physical, but more into the virtual and the what I would say the augmented or the immersive technologies. For me, I'm excited for Google Glass, Apple Glass, Amazon Glass. I am like, you don't understand. I am very excited. And I'm also excited about eVTOLs, electric vehicle takeoff and landing drones that are going to be moving goods and people around.
Right.
Because for me, it's just another form of mobility. Cars, yeah, they have a place. Tunnels and the Boring Company by Elon absolutely has a place. The Hyperloop by Richard Branson and team absolutely has a place. But that dead space between where aircrafts fly and the top of our buildings, that is maybe the optimum zone to introduce autonomous vehicle technology. Introducing autonomous in the cities, Kirk, I will say, or in countries, and I will specifically go into cities. Introducing autonomous in a country like the US, you will see it happening probably just in the downtown cores, right, where you've got the connectivity and you can kind of limit to say, look, this 1 mile radius is strictly autonomous. You can only be in this zone.
You can control the corner cases and all the things that are kind of hard to predict.
Absolutely. You try and do that in a rural part of the US or a rural part of Michigan or in Ontario. Good luck. There's blackout zones here for Wi-Fi and connectivity. Right. So, but the eVTOLs, and they don't have to be electric, but preferably it's clean energy. But these vertical takeoff landing, there are multiple companies. They're all working with the car manufacturers to build their vehicles. And I'm really excited about that, but super, super excited about augmented reality. I want to put on a pair of glasses. I want the windshield of my car to not to look over at my little phone and to follow Waze or whichever GPS service.
So dangerous.
I want my whole screen to just give me this kind of, perspective, big arrow. I want my windshield to change the signage when I'm in Shanghai or when I'm in Paris to English. I don't want to be reading, French or Cantonese or Mandarin. So,
I mean, that's all excited. Possible. The technology's there right now. It's
within 7 years. You're going to see the launch of Apple glasses by 2021, 2022. And I hear Google and Amazon, they're all on the crux and they're all going to be breaking out. You're going to see a huge change. The glasses, a similar type of glasses that you're wearing today, that's going to be the real estate that they require. Your phone, your device may become a processor that you keep in your pocket for these.
Yeah.
Because you're now, you're going to be watching, you're going to have an Excel spreadsheet over here. You're going to have Netflix over there. Like, just depending on where you move your gaze will be where and what you're kind of watching and learning.
Well, I mean, I just did my Tuesday show, Colin, on, I don't know what to do with my arms a lot of times. Like, we're all walking around kind of like this a lot of times. When I don't have this in my hands anymore, I'm kind of like, I don't know what to do. Well, the reality is we should be doing stuff with our bodies, like work or fun, productivity things. And to be able to get rid of this thing, put it in our pocket, and just have it up here is kind of been the vision for 20 years for people that are into tech. It goes first into wearables like you're talking about. My question is, are you a believer in the integratable, the next stage after wearables, which would be kind of integration into the human body,
Yeah. So, we are now in industry 4.0. And 5.0 is the cognitive. This is where, Neuralinks from Elon Musk and his team come into play, where they core out a portion of our skull on the back and suddenly they tap into our,
thoughts,
exactly. But, I'm all for it. I really am. I am all for it. But it's also on the other side. I'm reading I'm about to read a book. I was just listening to a podcast by Naveen Jain. It's called Moonshots, and Naveen's, he's got his academically, he's an engineer with an MBA, but he's such a genius. He's touching upon subjects which he shouldn't be, but he can because he's just a genius. And he's talking about the gut, the human gut. being the center. It's literally like the second brain, and it's been taught that way by Eastern medicine, both in China and India, for thousands of years as well, Kurt. And so he was talking about the health of an individual, and it relies upon what you eat versus what you don't eat. And you may your body type and who you are as an individual should be eating spinach or should not be eating spinach. As simple as that. It's not a blanket, oh, spinach is good for everyone. Actually, it's not. It can be quite toxic as well. So when you start to look at things like dementia and Alzheimer's, and to try and see how we can overcome those, and if technology can support that by creating a complete video recording of everything that you're witnessing and a memory bank of everything that you're thinking, it's going to be, obviously you want to make sure you got a bit of a
redaction at some level.
I'm a believer because of I'm born in the 70s. I grew up when Star Wars kicked off. The first few Star Wars, I'm not a fan of any of the other films that have come out since. To be honest, they've all been crap. Right. Just poor versions of the first. But I was a fan of Star Trek and the Wrath of Khan. And the reason I was a fan of the Wrath of Khan is because the original writer of Star Trek, the character, his actual full name is Khan Nuhin Singh. He's actually a Sikh warrior. He's meant to be the strongest warrior individual on the planet Earth, and he gets sent out. And so one of the reasons, as a child, we were kind of, engrossed with this character, because it was like, oh, that's the closest thing we have to us.
Right. That's pretty dope.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like, damn, like, look at that. Lacan is like that. But, that was all sci-fi. And you and I are now going to be fortunate to be living around some of that stuff. And it is exciting, but it also has to be, I won't say regulated yet. It needs an eye to be kept upon it, because you don't want it to be supporting, nefarious kind of,
it's kind of happening. Yeah, right. Yeah,
it always is, right? It always is.
Yeah, it's like this. I feel like we feel like technology, the current kind of wave of technology, feels kind of old already to us. But in the scheme of human development, it's so brand new. And we haven't even had a generation of development, what's the word, evolutionarily, to even adapt to what our current technology is. So it's all about the responsible rollout and figuring out how to integrate it into our lives without it taking over.
And it's like you said about the phone, and when it's not in the hand, it feels like you've lost a digit. It's also, what are the mental health implications of us being on our devices all the time? And those things have to be taken seriously as well. Like, the one thing I'm a big believer in, I've never drank, I've never smoked, I've never taken drugs. I've been clear. It's one of the things Sikhism's pretty cool about. They're saying, hey, listen, maybe you want to refrain from those things that change your mindset.
Right.
You've come wide and equipped a certain way. Try and go through life that way. And so I've taken that challenge, but one of the things I'm always aware of is that, hey, like, I don't want to be addicted to anything. Like, as good as, English Premier League football, soccer is on a Saturday morning, that's probably the only thing I'm addicted to. Like, I really try and make sure I don't get pulled into anything, whether it be religion or whether it be anything. And so this little device in my pocket can do that. Like, I swear to God, as soon as I get up in the morning, it's the first thing I want to grab and touch. My wife may be second. Like, do you know what I mean? It's that bad.
No, I'm the same way. It puts you. It immediately takes what could be a very controllable situation that all the variables here. It's your wife, it's your bed, whatever, and it immediately sets you off onto some external path that is outside of your real interest. A lot of times, you might have to reply to an important work email or what have you. But a lot of times it's some idiot, what they said on social media or something, and then you're worried about that now. It's like, I'm speaking to myself here, right? But
yeah. No, it is. It's like, what influence is social media having on us? Oof. We set up flipboards, we set up Pinterests, for things that we're interested in. But what is all of this doing to us? And probably less to you and I, Kurt. It's really more of the younger generation. So how do we manage? Because we grew up where we didn't have phones. I still remember the brick phones, the cell phones that you kind of held like this.
Like $14 a minute or something.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot of things. Technology shouldn't just be given like an open door policy to, go for it. We do have to monitor and engage. These things give off, energy. Is it good? Is it frying our organs? Like, what's going on? We have to ask those questions. I've spoken globally on 5G and V2X, and the one question after talking about 5G I got at every conference was like, how bad is it for our health? Like, is this thing frying us? And we all saw what happened at the beginning of COVID, people burning down cell towers, thinking that somehow it was 5G that caused it in China and so and so and so. And it's this craziness, but there is potentially some truth to it.
Of course.
We have to make sure that, hey, listen, radio, waves that are given off, or electromagnetic waves that are given off, can sometimes heat up, substances between, the surface and what's within. So, it's not to be naive, but it's also not to get kind of completely cuckoo and start blowing up cell towers.
Yeah. So to be clear, Colin Dhillon is not advocating for blowing up any sort of cell towers or anything like that. Not even close. What are you advocating for? What is kind of the you can talk about this from an APMA perspective, and a personal one, or a combination of both, but what is your kind of primary advocacy in the design world? I know you talked about connected cities and all of that, but give a little bit of an idea of what that really looks like to you and why you think it's important.
So let's kind of wind it back to autonomous. Why are we gung-ho and excited about autonomous? Because 94% of all accidents are human error. That is what we're trying to wind back, period. We're trying to bring that 94 down to 90, down to 80, down to 70, 60, 50, and so on. That is the only reason we're all into autonomous. Yes, it just so happens the cars look pretty sexy and decent, and the technology in there is attractive and sexy as well. So and I wrote an article a few years ago called Smart Cars, Dumb Infrastructure. And it was really a pushback on everyone asking me when I took this new job, when are we going to see autonomous cars? I'm like, well, the infrastructure around here seems it's from the 19th or the 20th century. Like, when you maybe improve the technology and the communication between the infrastructure and the vehicle, it may help it, which is a fact. So smart cities are a key player. And smart meaning, again, we want it to be a safe zone. And I always use this one kind of, example of, Kirk and I, we're at a pub, we're in downtown Detroit, some of those really nice boutique kind of restaurants and bars. And it's about 11:30, 12 at night, and we've left, and Colin's been drinking his sparkling water as usual, but Kirk's had a good few jubbly beverages, as you may. And we're walking, and we're carrying on the conversation as we come down the flight of stairs, and we're now on the road, and we're continuing to talk and paying attention more to the conversation and less to where we are. But because of the wearable technology Kirk's wearing, because of the phone in his pocket, it's sending a signal to an unknown vehicle which is approaching, because Kirk's actually doing a crab walk as opposed to walking straight. He's kind of somewhat walking diagonally.
I hear you, yeah.
And the signals is enough to send a buzz or a feeling or a sensation or a sound to you to say, hey, you're about to take a foot into the road and I'm coming behind you. And next thing you know, I may hit you.
Yeah.
And so to me, this is all about autonomous vehicle technology. It's about V2X and smart cities. It's about, designing, you've got to design it from the ground up. Like, it's like when we talk about cybersecurity, security by design. Don't develop a piece of software and then go, oh, now we've got to put patches on this from a cyber privacy standpoint. Right. So it should be safety by design. It should be security by design. You want to build these elements right into the basis. But, as like I said, as cool and as sexy as smart cities and autonomous vehicles are, we're doing this to reduce the number of people that die. Because as good as we think we are behind the wheels, everyone's always willing to jump onto Tesla and the fact that he's now got his new software into the vehicles and he's running these robo-taxi trials and things may not be perfect. They're not. He's on the 5 levels of autonomy. I think he's probably around level 3.5. He's not quite at 4 or 5 yet.
Well, I want to hear about the 5 levels of autonomy after you wrap this part up. But I don't want to cut you off from what you're saying now, though.
But the important thing is his work, his collection of data is all going to allow us to get to level 4 and level 5 autonomy a lot quicker. And the same goes to Waymo. Hats off to Waymo and the team out in Phoenix, Arizona, and the work they've been doing, and the millions and millions of miles of data that they're collecting. Yeah. It's all to try and make our lives safer. And the 5 levels, Kurt, or actually 6, because it starts at 0. So 0, if I could visually describe those 0 to 5. 0 is a Model T Ford. There is nothing electrical or technical about this thing. If anything, there's a crank at the front that you have to crank to get the car going. So that's 0.
Okay.
5, there is no steering wheel and there are no pedals. So you can't even drive this.
There's no manual overrides, basically.
There is nothing. Yeah, you can't do nothing. So that is a level 5. So in between 0 and 5, the current Teslas on the road, not the beta group that are now testing the latest software, are at best a level 2, level 2.5. A Cadillac STX, I think, is also at a level 2, level 2.5. Most cars are, with the ADAS, the assisted driver and technology that we see, getting too close to the car.
Adaptive cruise, lane departure warning, side blind zone.
All of this is technology, sensory technology, which will support autonomous vehicle technology. But in order for an autonomous vehicle to really take a chunk out of that 94%, your city needs to become smarter, i.e. your intersections have to become smarter. There needs to be communication from the vehicle to the infrastructure, pedestrian to the vehicle to the vehicle, grid to the vehicle. It just carries on and on and on. The more we connect, the more we also open ourselves up. And one of my other passions is cybersecurity, to say, look, I always talk about the scenario where Kurt goes into a retail store. It's 5 years from now. You no longer have to even tap. Your biometrics allow you to
iris
make
or
payment.
Something.
Yeah. You don't even need to stare into somewhere with your eyeball. It's boom. It's you. It's been recognized as you. It's like the Amazon stores. You're able to go in and leave without having to pay because they know it's you as soon as you walk in. But you need to be secure. Your data, your privacy of your SIN number, your bank cards have to be secure. So who's responsible for it at that particular private retailer? And then when you leave, you jump into a robo-taxi. Again, you are not tapping, you're simply getting in and then getting out. And so who's securing that now? Are we suddenly looking at a bunch of lids, or is it one cloud, and is it in the cloud, or is it all edged? Like, it suddenly goes on and on and on. So, but the positive news is there is a lot of work being done. One of our own here in Canada, QNX, BlackBerry QNX, is doing some amazing work helping to secure vehicles. Yeah. And so there is a lot of work going on, and there's a lot more to come as well.
Well, I don't mean to throw shade on your buddy Ralph. It has nothing to do with Ralph. I like him too. But I had a Grand Cherokee a couple years ago, right around the time when the hackers figured out how to shut down Grand Cherokees while driving down the street. I think it was any vehicle that had whatever the latest connectivity model was. And that was where it first kind of really struck me, and I'm in this industry. So for a lot of people that are outside of the industry, they maybe haven't thought about this. So talk about what a smart intersection. If you could just go out into the middle of Ontario, which there's plenty of land that you could do this with, by the way, Colin, and just start a just like you did with the Project Taro, start a little city, Taro United or whatever. And what is the first infrastructure you put down? What is the actual vision on that would allow us to eventually integrate into our old cities? But what does a new city look like? That's such a long-winded way of asking you. But
no, Kurt, you know what? When I wrote the article, I even said, look, why are our intersections currently laid out the way they are? Why do we have blind spots? Why do buildings come to a point instead of a chamfer, where in the car I can actually see who's coming, walking or driving, because I don't have to look around a corner per se. So I think from an architectural standpoint, there are things that we can do to make things more practical. Then I think things have to be sustainable. I'm really big on corporate social responsibility. Right. Things done ethically, things done to support the environment, things to make sure that you're paying forward, and giving back.
Right.
And you can make sure, there is technology today, even some solar technology, there is some kind of cleaner energy technology which can help to. So I think if I'm starting this brand new city, I'm already thinking about, okay, how is it going to be sustainable, self-sustainable? And then I'm looking at rethinking architecture completely, from civil engineering and how you start to map out and lay out a city, and to the buildings that go upon it, and what goes into a building and what materials are used in that building. But the one thing that I'm doing from the get-go as well is probably putting a complete cloud of connectivity throughout, where there is no weak zone or strong zones. It doesn't matter where you are in that city, you should be able to get full access because we're becoming more and more connected.
Right.
And then as soon as I'm talking cloud computing, I'm talking cybersecurity. I'm making sure that everybody's, look, people, you may have heard the term, today the new oil is data. People are mining and for data, and data is important. Google phones, your data gets shared by Google. That's one of the negatives of Google phone over an Apple phone or a Samsung product. So there is a value to the data. So we want to protect our data, but also have our data used to support that ecosystem. And so, you're now looking at making sure this is secure. And the other thing you want to make sure that we do is that when we build something, we shouldn't be building it to say, okay, this is going to last forever. We should be building it knowing the pace of technological development today, Kurt, has surpassed the pace of technological development from 300 years ago by 7 times. So what used to take 120 years now may take less than 10 to 15 years.
So durability is less important?
Well, not durability, but the pace of change would mean if you and I sat down and said, this is the perfect city and this is the perfect layout and these are the perfect buildings. 15 years from now, we may sit back down and go, maybe it was for 2020. Do you get what I mean? So,
it would have taken a century before you realize its shortcomings.
Yeah. Well, let's face it. Some of the cities, especially in Europe and places like that, this is how the roads were designed. You drive around in London, England. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, I can only drive around in a micro car in this place. Otherwise, I feel like I'm going to hit every other car, right? So, I think because again, we've talked about sustainability. We want to make sure that you can retrofit a complete city without it being kind of cost heavy to being able to do it. Do you know what I mean? It shouldn't be like
so kind of adaptability, upgradability, all of those are big parts of the design.
Yeah, as opposed to taxing, you and I who live in there to suddenly saying we're putting up taxes because we're going to be building this out and adding new infrastructure. And I think so. To me, it goes in that kind of a route. And I'll tell you a great place that's doing it pretty well is Singapore. If you've ever been to Singapore, if you know about these guys, know they have limited real estate, and definitely things have gone vertical. But their approach on how they build and what they do is that they're global leaders in developing cities. There's no doubt about it.
Well, they have money, and they also seem to have an extreme value on the environment too, which is that certainly can't be said about the money part. Can be said about the U.S., but not the environmental concern, at least on the policy level.
Yeah, well, I think one of the US's biggest challenges is like I know about Monsanto and genetically modified grain and how they've infiltrated, the Senate and other decision-making entities. And I'm sure it's the same with crude oil and all these other folks as well. So it gets a little sticky when you have people who have come from that certain particular walk of life, field of profession, right, advocating on behalf, so but I think the positives for the US and for Canada and particularly the US is, you have California, who is a global leader when it comes to technology, who are global leaders when it comes to policies and regulations that are good for the globe. Right. And so, California came out, I think, a few months ago and said 2035 will be the last year an internal combustion engine will be made or allowed into that state. And so that means the rest of the US will follow. So 2035 to 2040, it'll be the end of the ice age.
Well, here you are. You thought when you were a kid, or even when you went into art school and went into design, that you would never step foot in an auto company. And now you're part of such a big, holistic thing. I mean, you're such a holistic guy. I'm so happy to hear that this project you're working on is, I mean, you're talking about the chamfer of architectural building layouts. That's incredible. You know, it's really incredible. And it's not going to force you to, I get the feeling, correct me if I'm wrong, that you like having kind of a meta macro view of things because you were 11 months into the medical device field and you were kind of already sick of it. Now you don't really run the risk of getting sick of things because you have basically too much shit to deal with already.
Yeah, and it goes back to the design thinking as well, Kirk. To me, it's a problem. Like a city, to do a city layout, to do kind of architectural layouts. It's design problem. It's just it's not asking the same question over and over again. It's to challenge what's been asked. That's what I was the kid that used to get shit from his parents because I'd always like, why?
Why? So you're just wondering.
What do you mean? What do you mean why? Like, it's like, at school, why? Why? You ask, and you don't just ask because you're dumb and you don't know. Maybe I am dumb, but you ask because it's like, okay. And then you kind of contemplate. You contemplate on why things are done in a certain way. But yeah, for sure. 20 odd years ago, my friend, I thought I would probably be a high school teacher, teaching, technology, design, maybe history, and that would be it.
Well, I don't want to derail you from what you're working on with the APMA because I want to watch. I hope in my lifetime I see what we're talking about here. Do you expect that we will?
Oh, for sure. The Project Arrow will be complete by 2022, by December of 2022. You will physically see a vehicle. We've already had some of the caliber of companies and individuals that have asked to be a part of this is mind-blowing. But we're also doing it because we hope it kickstarts Canada for Canadian EV startups. We want Tesla type of companies to happen over here in Canada.
You have so much know-how there. I mean, with all the plants, I mean, even like the Cambridge and Woodstock plants out there are like some of the best in the, outside of Japan that you're going to find.
Absolutely. Yeah. And not only that, we've got the fastest growing tech sector in North America. For the last 2 years, Kurt, we've generated more tech jobs than Silicon Valley, Seattle, and Washington, D.C. combined.
That's wild to hear.
Combined. Yeah, but the problem is Canadians, well, we're just too nice. Oh, we're not going to tell anyone. Oh, thank you. We just help you,
Sorry.
That's it. The joke is the Project Arrow horn will actually say, sorry. That's just the nature of, and
it's what makes Canadians kind of cool though too. Let's face it.
It is. It really is, to be honest. And it's one of the reasons I felt at home here. As soon as I arrived, I was like, these people are amazing. But it's to try and shake them out of that, to say, look, it's great for us to have some of the best assembly plants. The Toyota plant last year won the Platinum Award from JD Power and makes it the best assembly plant in the world.
Right.
But wouldn't it be nice to have our own where GM just left and they've just come back to Oshawa? That causes a lot of pain and anguish to the families and to the employees of those areas and zones. And wouldn't it be nice to have the head office, the research centers, and probably the IP stay here in, for example, Southern Ontario? And yes, cars that you build here today are global platforms. Yeah, you may be building them in Michigan, in Tennessee, down in Mexico, in Querétaro, and then in Europe. But the head office stays here. Head office stays here, and there is that kind of that employment base here as well.
Well, I'm very long on Canada as a nation, just in terms of the amount. I mean, you have a very small population, a huge amount of space, tons of resources. You say sorry a little bit too much, but everyone, if that's the worst you can say about it, it's not bad. You have a handsome prime minister. The same cannot be said for us. That's for sure.
Yeah, and he's a good guy as well. We've been fortunate. So we actually sat down in February with the prime minister, and he was very excited. We talked about the several things on the list, and then he said, "Tell me about Arrow." And so we told him about Project Arrow, and we've got full support from the Prime Minister as well as the Premier of Ontario as well. So
I'm super excited. So when this thing's done, once you get Trudeau through and the other dignitaries, and you get through whatever I'm probably in the bottom tier, of the list. I want to come see it however I can. So
Absolutely. And hey, listen, why don't we next year, because we're going to be really in the thick of it, let's do another quick call and I'll bring you up to speed. I'll share where we are as far as we are in the engineering and build phase as we speak.
Yeah.
And so I'll give you an up to date. You'll know exactly how it's going and be happy to do so. When it's completely done, we expect it to be done December 2022, which means January 2023, we will be at CES in Vegas.
Okay.
Unveiling it. So, hey, listen, I guess we're going to see each other there.
We'll definitely see each other there. And I'm only 4, 5, 6 hours from Toronto. So if I'm ever in the air, I'll try to look you up. But man, I'm so grateful that you came on. I'm so grateful that I got to know you a little better. We've all, we have facial recognition and name recognition through being in the industry. I've always appreciated when I got to talk to you. We share a mutual friend in our James R. Dern out of New Zealand, who I talk about on the show relatively often, actually.
Big James, what a great guy. We met, I think, before I met you, and we just hit it off. And, I just asked you even before we started recording, like, how is he doing?
Yeah, well, I'm so glad that I was introduced to you, and I'm so grateful that you came on. Is there anything else you want to wrap up with? Or are you good to go?
No, well, Kurt, thank you very much. Keep doing what you're doing as well. Listen, we're all on journeys, right? Everybody's on a journey, and I think as long as people understand when you're on a journey, you do have to pull over and give the person with a flat tire a helping hand. Right. And so I'm hoping that I do my role and give back wherever I possibly can. Even though I may not be the greatest person at helping to, change a flat tire. But
now I'm trying to figure out if you think that I'm had a flat tire. I thought things were going well. Shit. People, go check out Colin's links down below. You're going to see some information on the article he was talking about, smart technology, dumb infrastructure. He's going to talk about Project Arrow. They'll see a link down there. Check him out. This is a big picture guy. He came into the attic and gave us more than I could have asked for. Thanks a lot, my man.
Anytime, Kurt. Thanks for having me on.
Peace out. Thank you so much, Colin. That's going to do it for episode 74 of A Talk in the Attic. Thank you so much for listening. Follow me on Instagram. Follow me on YouTube. We have a new merch store coming online soon. But more than anything, go check out Colin's information. Go check out the APMA and what they're up to. And let's try to remember some of the advice that Colin gave us, which is that it's all one big story here. We all have our individual paths, but without oneness, we don't have anything. So what a lesson. What a guy. Peace out, y'all.
I was drunk, broken down in Arlington, and you took me in. You put me on my feet, you made me sing. I was broke, you picked me up and you let me rest my hands. I was playing with your neck, and I'd be the disappointing journalist for you, and you'd sing these sad and silly love songs to me. You cracked, I picked you up and I took you in and I made you whole. Even though I was the one, even though I was the one, even though I broke you up. And I'd be the disappointing journalist for you, and you'd sing these sad maniacal songs to me. So what would I do if you leave? What would I do if you leave? I'd gather all my favorite things, walk right out in the trees, I'd die. So what would I do if you leave? What would I do if you leave? I'd gather all my pretty little things, pour myself another drink, I'd die. disappointing journalist for you. And you'd sing these sad and silly love songs to me.